Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us. I got to give a shout out to Sheba Coffee and Tea Co. Real quick. Their Mindful Morning Blend. Oh, it's fueling my brain for today's deep dive for sure. All right, so ready to tackle something that sounds kind of intimidating?
I'm all ears.
We're talking scalar waves. But don't worry, by the end of this, you'll get what they are, why they're, well, controversial, and why it even matters. Our source material today is the Rational Wiki entry on, you guessed it, scalar waves. So the big question is, are these things real? Are they just like pseudoscience or, somewhere in between?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, right? And it gets to the heart of how we understand science and how it can, well, sometimes be misunderstood.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So the article starts by defining a scalar wave. And it really emphasizes this idea of magnitude only, which makes it different from a vector. I'm having flashbacks to Physics 101, honestly. But can you break that down for us? What does that actually mean?
Sure, yeah, it's a core physics concept for sure. Basically, a scalar quantity just tells you how much of something there is. So, think of a car's speed. That's a scalar, right? But a vector, that gives you both the magnitude and the direction. Like the car's velocity would be 60 miles per hour north. Now, in general physics, a scalar wave is any wave that you can describe with just its magnitude at any given point. I mean, we experience these all the time, right? Like sound waves, ripples on a pond, even how heat spreads.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you. Those are all pretty familiar. So what makes this scalar wave idea so controversial then?
Well, the controversy comes in when folks try to use the term scalar wave with electromagnetism, but like in a way that kind of goes against, established physics. They say there's this whole other type of electromagnetic wave out there that operates outside of what we know.
That's where it starts to sound a little fringe science, right? The Rational Wiki article, it mentions that some proponents of this idea claim they can, tap into something called zero-point energy using scalar waves. Is that even a real thing?
Yeah. Okay, let's break that down a bit. So, zero-point energy, it's a concept from quantum mechanics, right? It's about the lowest possible energy level a system can have, even in like a perfect vacuum. Now, while this energy is theoretically real, there's just no scientific evidence to suggest we can actually extract it or use it for anything practical.
So it's like this theoretical energy source that we just haven't figured out how to access. And these scalar wave folks, they think they have the key.
Pretty much, yeah. And the Rational Wiki article debunks a bunch of the myths they use to support these claims. One example is this idea that you can create scalar waves and, get this, limitless power, all using a bipolar coil.
Okay, yeah, that one definitely caught my eye too. Can you explain that a bit more? It sounds pretty complex.
Sure. So imagine you have two wires, right? And they're wrapped together, but the electricity is flowing in opposite directions. And the idea is that these opposing currents, they create this special type of wave. But the reality is the magnetic fields they generate actually just cancel each other out. So you end up with, well, no net energy gain. Basically, you just get a lot of heat.
There's no free energy, just a really fancy space heater.
Yeah, pretty much. The problem is these proponents, they often misinterpret or misrepresent basic physics principles. Another example is this claim that scalar waves somehow invalidate or restore parts of Maxwell's equation.
Oh man, Maxwell's equations. I vaguely remember those from physics class. Refresh my memory. Why are they so important?
Well, Maxwell's equations, they're like the foundation of how we understand electromagnetism,
Right.
They describe how electric and magnetic fields interact and how they propagate. But these scalar wave proponents, they're essentially trying to rewrite the rules. They cherry pick parts of these equations to fit their narrative.
So we're seeing a pattern here, right? It's like twisting science to fit their ideas. But who are the people behind these claims? The article mentions a guy named Thomas Bearden.
Ah, yes, Thomas Bearden. He's considered, like a central figure in scalar wave pseudoscience.
Okay, so what exactly did Bearden believe about these so-called scalar waves?
Well, he had a whole bunch of theories. He claimed that scalar waves were the key to, well, everything. From limitless free energy to, get this, super weapons. He even claimed that the Soviet Union had developed scalar weapons that could cause earthquakes and control the weather.
Whoa, okay, now that's getting into some serious conspiracy theory territory. Did he have any actual evidence to back up these claims?
Not really, but he was really good at presenting his ideas using, scientific-sounding language, which I guess could be convincing to those who aren't familiar with the actual science.
Those smoke and mirrors, maybe?
Yeah. You could say that. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because his claims, they tap into those those deep human desires, like the desire for simple solutions to really complex problems like free energy and, of course, the fear of powerful hidden forces like secret weapons and stuff. It's like playing on those fears. Bearden wasn't just talking about weapons, though. He also claimed scalar waves could be used for healing and even like mind control.
Hold on, mind control, like actually controlling people's thoughts with these waves. That sounds like something out of a movie.
Right. It's a pretty common thing in these conspiracy theories. Bearden, he suggested that scalar waves could mess with brain activity, basically. And he even said that the human brain itself emits these waves, which he used to explain, like, telepathy.
So he's connecting this fringe science to paranormal stuff too. It's like he's
Yeah.
building this whole like web of wild claims.
Yeah, and that's how these things usually work. One crazy claim builds on another, and it gets really hard to tell what's real and what's not, especially when it's presented, like it's some kind of authority.
The Rational Wiki article also mentioned this guy Stephen Linstead. He made some pretty out there claims about scalar waves and medicine.
Oh, yeah, Linstead. He took things even further than Bearden, actually. He claimed scalar waves could explain homeopathy, cure things like cancer, and even reverse aging. He even invented this thing called a scalar wave laser. It supposedly delivers photons and electrons straight to cells.
Okay, now that one is just, I don't even know what to say. Delivering photons and electrons directly to cells. Is he saying humans can, like, photosynthesize now?
Right. It's like they're taking a scientific concept, like photosynthesis in this case, and just like completely distorting it to fit their narrative. There's no scientific backing for any of that.
It seems like the deeper we go, the weirder these claims get. The article even mentioned scalar waves being linked to mind control through, like, flickering TVs and cell phones.
Yeah, the idea that all this everyday technology is secretly emitting these harmful, mind-controlling scalar waves.
It's almost like people would rather blame some, I don't know, mysterious force, like scalar waves,
Yeah.
for their problems instead of, like, dealing with the real world.
Yeah, it's definitely easier to just blame something shadowy than to actually, deal with real societal issues and stuff. And it plays into this distrust of like technology and authority figures, which is a pretty common theme with these types of theories.
So we've got all these theories connecting scalar waves to free energy, super weapons, miracle cures, mind control, even paranormal stuff. It's quite a list. But what does all this tell us about, how we understand the universe and our place in it?
That's a good question. I think it highlights something really fundamental about us as humans. We want simple explanations, especially for things that seem like super complex or out of our control.
Right? It's like we want that one easy answer, the magic bullet for complex problems.
Yeah.
And maybe that sometimes leads us down these rabbit holes of misinformation.
Exactly. And, science is about exploring and discovering new things, but it's also about being critical, being skeptical, and being honest with ourselves about what the evidence actually shows.
It's like we said earlier, it's about being mindful, right? Mindful about what we consume, just like with, well, anything else.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, that mindfulness applies to, the sources we trust, the claims we accept, and even the biases we bring when we're trying to understand the world.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface here.
We really have. There's so much more to talk about, from the people who influence these ideas to the psychological reasons why people believe them. But the main takeaway for our listeners is that, you got to approach these fringe theories, all of them, with a healthy dose of skepticism and critical thinking.
Definitely. And the Rational Wiki article, it's a great starting point for anyone who wants to learn more about the claims and the evidence, or lack thereof. But I do want to bring it back to our sponsor for a second. Sheba Coffee and Tea Co. They're not just about good coffee. They're also about promoting, mindful consumption.
That's a great point. And that idea of mindfulness totally applies to how we take in information, too. Just like, enjoying a cup of Sheba coffee, we should savor information, take our time to process it, question it, and connect it to what we already know.
And just like there are all these different types of coffee, there are different ways of looking at information. It's important to be open to those different perspectives, but to also be, discerning, and evaluate them critically. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of scalar waves, let's raise a metaphorical cup of Sheba coffee, shall we? To the pursuit of knowledge, the power of critical thinking, and the importance of mindful consumption, both of information and, well, delicious drinks.
Absolutely. Cheers to that. And remember, listener, the journey of discovery never really ends. There's always something new to learn, something old to look at again, and something unexpected to challenge our assumptions. So stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep exploring.
Makes you wonder, why are people so drawn to these, like, fringe theories,
Yeah.
even when the science just doesn't back it up?
Yeah, it's a question that's been around for a while. No easy answer, really, but I think it kind of gets at a few key things about, human nature.
Like what?
Well, people want certainty, right? We want to understand the world and we want explanations that make sense. Science, it's all about getting closer to those explanations, but sometimes it takes time, It doesn't always have all the answers right away.
So these theories, they kind of jump in to fill those gaps.
Yeah, in a way. They offer these simple answers and they seem to like connect the dots in a way that feels, I don't know, convincing, even if those connections aren't, based on logic or actual evidence.
It's like they make a complicated world feel, I don't know, more ordered.
Exactly. And then there's the whole distrust of authority thing. People might feel like, I don't know, they're being lied to or that someone's hiding information from them.
And these theories, they give them a different story. One where they're like in the know, they see through the lies.
Yeah, it's like empowering, I guess. They
Uh,
become part of this group with like secret knowledge.
This reminds me of what we were talking about before, the whole mind control thing.
Right.
Do you think that plays into it too?
Oh, absolutely. This idea that there are these unseen forces controlling us, whether it's the government or big corporations or even these mysterious scalar waves, it really taps into that fear of losing control.
So it's a way to, like, explain away tough stuff, or maybe even personal struggles by blaming something else.
Yeah, and in a weird way, it can be comforting because you don't have to take responsibility,
Okay.
right? It's not your fault things are going wrong. It's this outside force that's pulling the strings.
So what can we do about it? How do we fight back against, like, misinformation and encourage people to, think critically and look at the evidence?
That's the big question. I think it starts with education. We need to give people the tools to like really evaluate information, to spot those logical fallacies and to understand how science actually works.
So more science literacy.
Exactly. But it's not just about like memorizing facts and stuff. It's about having that curious mindset, being skeptical and being open to changing your mind when there's new evidence.
It's about being like a scientist, right? Always asking questions and, always looking for new information.
Yeah, and it's also about being aware of your own biases. I mean, we all have them. Recognizing them is like the first step to keeping them from, messing with your judgment.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We went from, like, the technical stuff about scalar waves to the psychology of belief and misinformation.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey. And, we debunked a lot of the pseudoscience around scalar waves, but I hope our listeners walk away with a better understanding of how these fringe theories pop up and how we can all be more careful about the information we consume.
Couldn't agree more. Before we go, got to give one last shout out to our sponsor, Sheba Coffee and Tea Co. Remember, folks, just like choosing a good cup of coffee, choosing good sources of information is important. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep those minds buzzing.